Dun, 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 dun. Kilted
Tilted
balls.
balls.
Oh, so close. I totally thought you were gonna nail it.
I did.
So man, yeah, you
I must
were
have. Well, I have a delay.
you have a delay. You have a delay. That happens. Those happen. Welcome everybody back to the Kilted Balls podcast. It is 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time,
hmm
right? So we're at 9 o'clock right now, which is cool. So started a little late, got a call from one of my college girls.
Yep. Yep.
College girls meaning daughters, not like my college girls
Oh yeah.
that I'm dating, right? That'd be kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Conversations would be really awkward.
It would be like crazy awkward. It's like when you have a talk like with a fae, right? Like
hmm
especially if the fae's your daughter, like faes are notoriously sexual and
hmm
daughters. It's just like a whole weird thing, right?
Yep.
At least it is to me. But no, it was good talking to her. She was a bit overwhelmed today. And so it was kind of a thing. So, she's in her fourth week of college. She's in a freshman. She's in a very competitive program, but that's like her jam kind of a thing. So
Yeah.
that's not an issue. But like today they were working on resumes. They had a huge thing where industry people were all there and they were interviewing them and setting up
Four
interviews.
weeks in.
Yeah, for like co-ops and internships. And she's like, whoa. So I don't know if everybody on here can tell, but Kilted and I are pretty laid back people.
hmm
We're not like kind of people, and she is similar. So when they come like at her going, hey, let's do your resume. Okay, hey, let's go interview. She's like, whoa. Like, I don't even know what this is. Like, I'm 4 weeks in.
hmm
And so she was a bit overwhelmed, and she called mom and was like, I'm a bit overwhelmed. And mom's like, just chill, like,
Yeah.
do you, right? Like, you
hmm
don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You can come home for the summer, you can do a co-op, you can do whatever. Nobody
Yeah.
cares. Like,
Yeah.
nobody actually cares. And she's like, I don't know. And
I care. I
right.
want her to get something in Charlotte.
Oh yeah. Well, then she called and she was like, hey, it actually went really well. And we're like, really?
Awesome.
And she's like, well, yeah, because the people I was with, I'm like they're like, hey, we want to talk to you and we want you to do this. And she's like, no. And they're like, that's awesome, that's cool, well, here, take our information in case next year you want to, or maybe in the spring you'll change your mind, and
hmm
we'd really love to have you. And she's like, so she's like, and like she goes, I talked to one of my advisors and I talked to some of my friends who are like sophomores and juniors, and they're like, oh you don't have to do any of this. Like, it's
Okay.
totally like free will, like you choose. And she's like, so she felt way better.
Oh, that's good.
Right. Which again, that's kind of what I tell people all the time. Like, when things are right, they're right. And don't
hmm
don't force it. And that's how,
hmm
like, a few of them were like, don't force this stuff. If it's the way it's supposed to be, it's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's only a few things you should ever force. Like tacos.
Tacos.
Tacos are something like, even if you're like, I'm not quite that hungry, I'm eating a taco.
Nothing wrong with eating a sixth or seventh taco.
Nothing wrong.
Although, there's on the way we're taking Oliver in, we listen to like the radio, and there's a show it's called Blown Off.
Mm-hmm.
So someone will come in, someone will call like, oh, I got blown off, I don't know why, blah blah blah, and then they call the person, talk to a middle person. Sometimes it works out, usually it doesn't, there's something going on. But today, just because you brought it up, the girl didn't want to go back out with the guy because he ate 5 Big Macs
Like, at one time.
at one time. They made a joke. They were going to McDonald's for breakfast or for their first date,
Yes.
and he proceeded to eat 5 Big Macs like
Yeah.
in one sitting, and she's like, "That's disgusting."
That is
She's
not
like,
a
"Oh, I
good
was
first
really
date.
hungry."
That is not a good first date. Right.
So it made me think of it, eating a bunch of tacos, eating Big Macs.
Well, I've eaten a lot of tacos. You've eaten a
hmm
lot of tacos. Tacos are pretty much amazing. But it was National Cheeseburger Day.
Yesterday.
And so I was like, ooh, McDonald's has 50-cent cheeseburgers. I'm going to go and order a shit ton of cheeseburgers. Because, like, growing up, one of my fondest memories is a lot of my siblings worked at McDonald's in town.
Mm-hmm.
And, McDonald's used to have that rule. If it sat for 10 minutes, you had to pitch it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would always pitch it into a box and then bring the box home.
That's awesome.
So like they'd come in and there'd be like, 20 cheeseburgers. I'd be like in heaven, right? And since then, as you know, I'm mildly addicted to things like McDonald's. And so I was like, yay! You could only get one for 50 cents.
Oh man.
So I just got like a quarter pounder with cheese with bacon. But I was sad because I was like, I'm gonna eat 20 cheeseburgers tonight.
You're like, I'm doing this.
So I get where that guy's at.
Yesterday.
Huh?
Yeah. We went to Bad Daddy's yesterday.
Ooh, that's nice too. Well, I get it, like what that guy was doing. But if you're going on a date, especially a first date, first off, you shouldn't be getting a Big Mac on your first date. Like that's like a rule, right? And
I mean, if you're at McDonald's, Big Mac is arguably the best sandwich there.
Amy says the best sandwich there is the quarter pounder deluxe with cheese.
I don't know if I've had the deluxe.
I have not either. I took a bite of hers once and it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So it's not what I would get, right? I tend to get a McBitchin all the time. But you know what? If I was going on a date and I took them to McDonald's, I might get a McBitchin. I might get a quarter pounder. I'm not getting 5 Big Macs. Like that's not the
that's
impression.
Why you're not single.
Well, that's not the impression.
You haven't been single very much in your life, and that's probably why you didn't have to go on a dating app.
Holy cow! Who just walked by you? I saw a naked back and long hair, but I'm thinking it was Tristan and not anything exciting.
That was Tristan. You got real excited about that.
I was like, I'm gonna see a boob.
He might show you his boob when he comes back up.
Nice. You know what? That's another thing, right? If you have 5 Big Macs on your first date, you're probably not going to see boobs, right?
You did not.
You're probably not. That's not going to be like a thing, right? And I'll tell you right now, nobody is going to be aroused by you eating 5 Big Macs.
Possibly, that quite possibly might be true.
Like that's probably not going to happen. Except, wasn't there a movie once?
These are lessons to live by.
Listen, we're spouting truths today. Truths, people. Let these be lessons to you. Oh, there is a boob.
Oh, yeah, you can see a boob. Nice.
This is what happens when you don't turn on your background to fog everything.
I know. I was excited about my beholder.
I know, and I was super happy to see it. I didn't know we were going to see a naked dude walking by. By the way, everybody, if you're interested, he is not a minor. That wasn't child pornography.
Not a minor.
No. What movie was it where the guy he was like a gigolo, right? And one of his dates, it's a comedy, was with a girl, and she was just like, I want food. And that was his date. Do you remember?
Was it Deuce Bigelow?
Deuce Bigelow. That's what it was. It was Deuce Bigelow. That's for sure. For sure.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh.
Forever since I've seen that.
I have not seen it for a while, but thinking about 5 Big Macs arousing something, I was like, oh, that lady probably would have been aroused by 5 Big Macs.
That's true. That's true.
That's probably a thing. So, yeah. Who knew we would get so much play out of National Cheeseburger Day?
I know that was I again on that morning show we heard it, and I pulled out chicken already for dinner, but I was like, I really feel like a cheeseburger.
Amy said, she goes, these advertising things, she goes, it was somebody who was like, how are we going to sell cheeseburgers? Ooh, National Cheeseburger Day. Oh, it's National Donut Day. Oh, I'm like, I don't care the reason. I'm a sucker. You're calling it national. If there had been Haaden-Dazs.
Yeah. Well, because then you could have got your 49-cent cheeseburgers.
Oh my gosh. And I would have ordered a dozen of them and I wouldn't have cared.
Been awesome.
So Kilt had bought this once. This is Glenn Fittich, a pre-made Manhattan, and he left it here, and it's almost gone. And I'm wondering who drank it because I'm pretty sure I didn't. But I did not like it when I first got it, but I'm polishing it off because right now I think after it's sat a while, it's tasting pretty good. You can see it's super dark.
Yeah, I thought it was good. They were giving samples away at Meijer, so I got tricked into it. But yeah, I think I cracked it and only had one when I was there. But the last time I was there, I had some more.
Oh, so maybe that's why. Well, now it's gone because
Maybe it was when we were playing Dominion. Oh
I'm
no,
like,
we had
this is
different
pretty
stuff.
good. I'm like, this is pretty good. I would, but it wasn't good before. I think the cherry was not right before, and now it's
Okay.
right. So
Had time to soak in.
I was thinking, you and I were chit chatting about one of our listeners
Mm-hmm.
about religion, and we've talked about
Mm-hmm.
religion a lot here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking about the fact that we had a conversation on here sometime within the last year about my daughter saying, I know what you believe. Because I was
Mm-hmm.
like, why don't we ever talk about our beliefs and systems? Like people like are genuinely interested in that when they're talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, but you aren't. She's like, well, I know what you believe. And I'm like, girl, you have like no freaking clue.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've lived with me, but we haven't talked. And if you don't talk to me, like it's so surface knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking you had that friend who was like, well, I know what Ball believes, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he's Catholic and this is, I'm like, boy.
I can't wait for you guys to meet.
But you know what I'm saying? I'm like, first off, for all of our listeners, if you did not know this, it's probably important for you to know. I am not contained in any box.
Yes.
That is not by choice. Like I don't live as trying to be an outlier. I just am an outlier, right? And
I
I
just
was,
said that recently. I can't even remember what it was. I'm like, don't try to put me in a box.
yes.
Like, no, I don't need to be like that.
And people always have.
Oh, I
And
lost. Yeah.
like
Oh.
Kilted will tell you back in high school, I had people come up to me and be like, well, you're a jock. You wouldn't understand. And I'm like, a jock? Like, I'm like, okay, I guess I can see why you might call me a jock, but I'm not like really coordinated. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that guy, right? But people are like, oh no, you're a jock. I'm like, okay. And then people would be like, you're a band geek. Like all you do is play the trumpet and go do all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I can see that you would call me a band geek. And then they'd be like, well, you're a nerd
Mm-hmm.
because you're smart and you like read all the time. And I'd be like, right. And then people are like, oh, well, you're a gamer because you're always gaming. I'm like, how about you just don't try to fit me into your little predefined boxes
Mm-hmm.
because they don't work. And people,
Yeah.
even to this day, like they'll be like, oh, well, what was one that came up recently? They were talking about something. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that from when I used to do derbies. And they're like, you used to do derbies? I'm like, well, actually, they were races, they were figure eight races, but they were similar. And they're like, you used to race cars? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, that's weird. And I'm like, the only reason that's weird is because you have put me into a box.
Mm-hmm.
And so you think that's weird because that didn't fit your box. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things that don't fit your box, right? Kilted
Yeah.
has seen me play ultimate frisbee in my underwear.
Mm-hmm.
And not sexy underwear, mind you.
I was the one wearing the sexy underwear.
You wore the sexy underwear. I wore like super nasty underwear. Right. And so, like,
Well, it made your wife turn on more. So
that's true. That's probably how I got married, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to look up, dang it, I had her name, Jessica Rocky, but that wasn't her name, or it is her name. Do you remember she played Ultimate with us, co-ed? Redhead.
Brown, not Jessica Brown.
Yeah, it's Jessica Brown.
Okay.
And then it became Jessica Rocky.
Okay. I didn't
I think.
realize that.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's old, right? We're talking
I
about
know the last time I talked to her, she was married, but I didn't catch her name.
that
'Cause
must
she
be
was a
the
coach.
name.
She was a coach for Portland.
Yes,
when
and she
I
was
a coach
teaching
for
there, and
Portland,
I
so, yeah.
interact with Portland a lot, and I've seen her at wrestling meets before, and I was doing all this stuff, and I was like, oh, I wonder if she's still there, and I couldn't find her, which is,
Mhm.
I was just like, whatever.
Yeah.
I wasn't that vested, but I was laughing about that memory, and I was like, oh, she was at one of those tournaments where we did that, right? And that was like up in Toronto, I think.
Yeah. That
Mhm.
well, gender blender.
See, people, you can't put us in a box.
Mhm.
Some people you can. We're not one. And my beliefs would fall into that. And I decided, I think I have a Bible verse that I like that I want to share
Oh yeah.
with you.
Awesome.
I think I've shared it with you before, but I think it helps define a lot of my beliefs when I'm talking to people. And I remember having these conversations like with Chuck, right? So Chuck is on the outs. I think his wife is a listener. So, hey, Stacy, congratulations on your marathon. That's freaking awesome.
Yes.
Right. But like her husband would always be like, listen, I'm going to hell. And I'm like, why would you be going to hell? And he's like, well, because I'm an atheist. I'm like, well, first off, if you're an atheist, you don't believe in hell. So you couldn't go to hell.
Yeah.
I'm like, that literally doesn't make any sense. And he'd be like, well, according to you, I'm going to hell. And I'd be like, no, because I don't think that's like really a thing. And he'd be like, how can you not think that? You're a Catholic, right? They try to put me in that box. And I'm like, well, because, and so I think this is like John 14:1 or something.
Okay.
Right. And the way the verse goes, I'm going to paraphrase it. And for those of you who haven't listened to Kilted and I spiel about this before, I often paraphrase Bible stuff because there's more than one Bible.
There you go. You don't have to say which one.
Well, because people will always say, right, like, well, I only believe it if it's in the Bible. But they don't tell you what Bible they're reading. And yes, listeners, in case you didn't know, there's a whole shit ton of Bibles out there. And so for you to say, oh yeah, I only follow what's in the Bible, but you don't specify what Bible, it really changes things depending on what Bible you're looking at or reading. I had a guy once, super like born again Christian, loved him. He taught physics. But one time he was like talking to me and he's like, well, the Bible says this. I'm like, are you sure? I go, I think you're reading a different Bible than me. And he's like, you're right. He goes, we need to go back to the Hebrew. And I was like, okay. Ooh, wise. And I'm like, good luck. And he's like, well, what do you mean good luck? And I'm like, well, half of the Bible was written in Greek. It wasn't written in Hebrew. And he's like, well, I'm talking about the Old Testament. And I was like, I thought you said the Old Testament didn't matter because the New Testament was what Jesus did. And that's all that matters. Well, I did. And I go, the Roman part or the Greek part?
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, you're just being confusing. I'm like, I'm not being confusing. You want things pretty in a box with a freaking bow. And the world is not pretty in a box with a freaking bow. That helps you if you don't want to think, and that is 100% totally great and totally acceptable. Like, I'm all about that. But in my world, I'm a science person. We're skeptics and we believe you have to think everything through. And some of you are like, oh, see, I knew it. It's because you're into science. Actually, it's not. It's because I'm Jesuit trained. So Jesuits are a part of the Catholic Church that believes you should use logic and critical thinking on everything, including God and the Bible. So the Jesuits are considered the defenders of the Catholic faith mentally.
Yeah.
Right? They believe that kind of stuff. And because of that, that's why I'm into science, right? So that's how I was trained growing up to think about faith. And that led me to think of science as my career because they follow the same logic, right? And if you're like, whoa, religion and science don't get along, bitch, religion made science. Right? Like, it was a priest who came up with the Big Bang Theory. It was the church that helped advance evolution. Like hate to bust your bubble, but like we got the world through the Middle Ages. Like if it wasn't for the church, we'd all still be like pooping in the water. That's for you, Jesse, if you heard that. Right? So anyway.
So you're saying Jesse's like Jesus because he's taught people not to poop in the water?
Yes.
I agree.
He's so much like Jesus. So here's my quote that I always think of, and it helps me put everything to reference, right? So it's like John 14:1-ish, right? And basically, in this part, they're talking about Jesus talking to his disciples and stuff. And he's like, listen, he's trying to put it so you can understand. So he's like, my Father's house has many rooms, and I've got a place for you there. And I'm going to prepare a place for you. And, I'm going to take you there. y'all with me? So Jesus says it has many rooms and we've prepared a place for you. And Jesus talks in many spots of the Bible. God knew you before you were born, right? So if you're a hardline Christian right here, you're like, yeah, oh yeah, I know what you're saying, Paul. Jesus said, I knew you before you were born. I knew what you were. And he said, yeah, my Father's prepared a place for you. All true stories, right? Every Christian knows
according
this.
to the Bible.
According to the Bible. So they all believe that.
Yes.
Did you notice there were no ifs in any of those statements? There's not a single if in those statements. They prepared a room for you. They've known you since before you were born. They didn't prepare a place for you if you were good. They didn't prepare a place for you if you were bad. They didn't prepare a place for you only if you prayed enough. They knew you before you were born and prepared it already. It literally, there's no ifs. It's already there. It's chilling, waiting for you. When our buddy Chuck was like, listen, I'm an atheist and your religion, I'm going to hell. I'm like, bitch, there's already a place for you in heaven, which is probably going to be your hell. So it's kind of a double-edged sword because you're bunking with me. So good luck.
I often wonder if like sometime, in the next 40 years, if things will circle back around, we could all actually hang out again.
Stacy has said multiple times, I was like thinking about him when he's running that race. And I'm like, I wonder if he ever thinks about this stuff. And it's like, should I swallow my pride and talk to people again? Or shouldn't I? Or do I even care? Like Chuck was always big, like, listen, I just don't care. Right? Yeah. Just in general. And so I could see him still being that way. And again, that's who he is. And I think that's awesome. And if that's how he is, that's how he is, right?
Yeah.
Would I think both of our lives would be fuller? Well, I think that's true all the time. I think the more people you have in your life, the fuller your life is.
Yep.
Right?
I agree.
But I also don't like hunt that shit down either. So but yeah, so that's like my Bible verse of the day, right? Like
there you go.
It's there for you. And so people will say, whoa, what about hell and all of that? I think people do that to scare people.
Right? Well, does it even talk about hell in the Bible?
So especially interesting, you should mention this. If you talk to like Seventh-day Adventists, right? They'll tell you there's no hell in the Bible. And you can be like, what do you mean there's no hell? There's not. They're like the actual Greek and Hebrew, it doesn't say hell. It just says you die. And they're like, you just cease to exist. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Because we were talking about that the other night, that there's not a hell.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because there's lots of things. There was stuff in this week's sermon and stuff about it. And they're like, they're saying you'll be in unquenchable fire. Okay. Why? Hell was made by the 7 layers of hell by, what's his name?
Dante.
Thank you. Dante's Inferno. That's where the concept of hell came from, really, was Dante's Inferno. That's where everybody got the imagery and the beauty of it, or not beauty, I guess, depending how you think. Right? But it's like, that's not like part of it. Even in the spot where they're like, oh, they will throw you in Gehenna. And like people will be like, see, that's hell. That's Gehenna's hell. No, Gehenna was literally the dump outside of Jerusalem. They were saying you'll be thrown into the trash. And Gehenna was always on fire because it was a dump. And as we know now, dumps produce tremendous amounts of methane and they're always on fire. Right? So you're making some leaps there. Yeah. Is the point. Right. Yeah, and it could have meant hell. And they're like, well, what about Satan? Ooh, yeah, let's take Satan. Satan, theoretically, a Christian's biggest bad guy who was thrown into hell. Right? If you believe the Christian like theology.
Does it say, I thought he was just cast out. Does it actually say he goes to hell?
No, that's my point.
Oh.
That's my point, right? In a lot of people's Christian theology, they're like the devil, went to hell. And then you'll talk to other people and they're like, yeah, devil's on earth trying to influence you to sin. Well, wait, which is it? Is he on earth or is he on hell? Well, he went to hell, but now he's on earth. Oh, so you can leave hell.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, you can't leave hell. Whoa, 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 whoa. You said they were damned for all eternity, but now you're saying they can come to earth. So that means either earth is hell or they're not
Possibly. People believe
damned.
that.
Yeah. Or they're not damned for all eternity. Like, what my mom always said, right? And my mom is a very, very strong Catholic Christian, right? Like, she's like all in all the time, right?
Yeah.
If she could go to church every day, she would go to church every day, right? She's like all in. She always said that people misunderstand hell and purgatory. She goes, they misunderstand all the time. It says you were cast out. And I'm like, right. She goes, it doesn't say you're thrown in a bad place. She goes, hell is not being with God. She goes, that's what hell is. Like knowing that he's there, knowing that you want to be there, but you're not able to be there. And interestingly enough, this ties into your belief system and a lot of mine, right? Where we believe we connect with a higher power.
Yes.
Right. And we get assimilated by that higher power. And if that's what you think, and you're like, yeah, one day I'm going to get uploaded to the major consciousness, but then you die and you find out you can't get there, you're stuck against the firewall. That would be frustrating.
Yeah. Well,
right?
Wayne Dyer, who I love and who, a lot of my belief system has come from like hearing him talk and reading his books and, stuff that I had believed already, but just, he put it in a little bit of different words, but he talks about being further away from the source, God, whatever you want to call it, is, that it's same idea. The further you are away, the further you are in hell.
Yes. And the Bible does reference that. Like it'll say, even in the parts of the Bible that are weird and jacked up, it'll say there was a huge chasm between the people who were saved and the people who weren't. The imagery is saying you've been separated and you can't cross. And and there'll be great wailing and gnashing of teeth. I don't know anybody who gnashes their teeth like that when they're upset, but apparently that was a thing back then. I don't know. Right. But again, it's the distance from the source. And that's what my mom used to say. She goes, purgatory was you were separated, but you knew eventually you would get there. So you had hope, and that made the difference. And she goes, hell is that gulf is so big that you'll never get there. You're never going to break through. And my response always, and you've heard me say this before, is never's a really long time. It's a really long time to think that a soul or a consciousness won't bridge the gap.
Yeah, I won't say, okay.
Well, whatever's keeping them from that, right? Like that's what Father Joe, right? Father Joe Ministry is a great guy to listen to, but he'll often say, like, God always wants you there. God has a room prepared for you, just like we have rooms for our kiddos in this house. Like, and they're always going to be here waiting for our kiddos. And he goes, God has those rooms. He goes, it's not God, it's you screwing it up. It's you saying, yeah, I'm not ready. I'm not going to you yet. It's me keeping myself back. And he goes, and that frustrates you because you're not becoming part of the higher consciousness. You're not becoming part of that. And so it's more and more frustrating. And something in you is keeping you from that. Right. And you've got to get, and the Dean Koontz Odd Thomas books. Do you remember Odd Thomas?
I love Odd Thomas books.
Odd Thomas is great. Dean Koontz, people, if you've never read Odd Thomas, it's good. But Odd Thomas, like they talked about the fact through him, like you're trying to get to this next pinnacle and you're really close. Most people aren't. Most people have to keep redoing this and get themselves cleaner, clearing, almost like the idea of reincarnation, right?
Yeah.
Like you got to keep doing it over until you get closer and closer to being there.
Yes.
Same
with learning lessons. You have to do them over and over again.
Just keep doing them over till you learn them. What do they say in Odd Thomas? They're blue, right? You got to be blue. You got to be crystal blue.
Yeah,
whatever.
those are the last couple were not, in my opinion, not as good, but overall, well worth a listen, I would say.
Well worth the read. They're fast reads, and the movie Odd Thomas wasn't bad either.
Hmm.
So,
Oh yeah,
oh,
the movie was there. You're right. The movie was pretty good.
the movie is pretty good too. Yeah, for sure. So yeah. So anyway, point being, hard to put me in a normal categorized box.
Hmm.
I would say, and the same I would assume with you. I don't
I
think
would
of
like
you
to
in a
think so. Well,
box.
I even had a hard time trying to explain because I don't know if he was trying to put me in a box, but he was trying to understand within just a few words for his understanding.
Well, and so this is a big thing with me because that's kind of my gig, right? I tell people all the time, my job is you've got a small framework and I've got to try to figure out how to get my ideas into your framework. That's the
Hmm.
trick, right? Because
Hmm.
I can't, it's really hard to rewire somebody's framework. So I've got
Yeah.
to add things on to whatever framework you've built for yourself,
Yes.
right? And that's like when we talked about education before and we said it's the training and learning how to train. A normal
Hmm.
person who doesn't know, like they don't know how to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like how do I
Yeah.
fit these things I want you to know into your framework when your framework is vastly different from my framework? And
Yeah.
some people are not good at that, and you know those people because you're like, man, I had this teacher and they sucked. Right.
Hmm.
If you thought the teacher sucked, that means they never hit your framework correctly,
Yes.
right? And maybe they helped other people, and you're like, why is that person learn so well and I don't? Well, there's a trick to it, right? You gotta,
Yeah.
the better you are, the more frameworks you can put stuff in.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
And I really I loved that talk. I mean, that's something I could do over and over and cover different things. I mean, who knows if it'll happen again or, when or
Yes.
but it
Well, and
was I
like I
loved it.
look
It was
forward to
awesome.
meeting him and having those talks. Like, you know me, I don't mind having those talks.
Hmm.
If people want to listen,
Hmm.
I don't mind having those talks. I don't like talking when people are just trying to like argue or fight with me.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about that in this. We don't got time for that. We're not interested in that. But people who want to like talk and be like, wait, but I don't understand. Like,
Hmm.
how does that work? Like, I don't mind trying to explain myself with that.
Hmm.
But I don't want to be like, oh, well, I think this, and them going, listen, listen, listen. That's not how it is. All right, fuck you. Believe what you want. I don't care.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like you do you, right?
Hmm.
It's not about what I think, right? It's about what you think. And if you want to know more, ask me more,
Hmm.
right? But if it's not, then whatever. And now I'm sitting here going, what the hell are we going to call this episode today?
Mm.
Church and cheeseburgers, cheeseburgers and church.
Oh, cheeseburgers and church. I was thinking
Ooh,
tales from the soapbox.
tales from the soapbox. I might have been on a soapbox.
I loved it.
Mhm.
Yeah, cheeseburgers and church, I think is awesome.
I could be tales of the soapbox, cheeseburgers and church.
Hmm.
I like it because then
You
people
try to
would know
keep
what
your
they're getting into. They'd be like, "Holy shit, they were on a soapbox tonight." And by they, I mean ball buster, and sometimes shit happens. So, is what it is. Oh, we had an interesting text exchange today. Let's end the episode with our text exchange.
Oh yes.
So I
That was
put
early.
on Twitter today. I don't know if listeners you saw this, right? But I threw on Twitter. What did I say? I said, today just felt funky,
Yeah, it
right?
was from yesterday.
Yeah. So this is yesterday. I said, today felt funky. What did I say? It wasn't just that, right? Oh, tomorrow's going to be great. Love y'all, right? So,
Hmm.
Kilted and I love everybody. But I was like, today just felt funky. Like I would say if I was one of those people, like it was like a case of the Mondays, but it wasn't bad. Like
Yeah.
nothing went bad on the day. I had a good day. I loved life. You
Hmm.
know, I volunteered. It was all good. Just felt like, mm. And so you had texted today and said, hey, I hope it went right or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget
Yeah.
even what it was.
Like today, better day today, or something like
Yeah.
that.
Better day today. And I was like, whoa, whoa, it wasn't bad. it just felt funky, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's an interesting thing for people. Like, I do have days where they're not like every day is not better than the day before.
Mhm.
Like that's kind of impossible, I think. But that doesn't mean the days are bad.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I think people do that. They're like, oh, I had such a bad day. I hear people say that. Like, I
Mhm.
had such a bad day. And I'm like, what made it bad? Oh, well, I didn't get my cinnamon toast crunch. Okay, that doesn't make your day bad. That means you're just a white privileged a-hole, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not a bad day. Like, why is it a bad day? Oh, well, I slept in. Okay, well, you got to sleep in. Like, that's
Mhm.
amazing. That's not a bad day,
Yeah.
right? Even kiddos, like all kiddos will, oh, I failed a test. That doesn't make it a bad day. You're
Mhm.
choosing to let that
Yeah.
be bad. Like, that could be a great
That's a
experience.
culmination of actions that you took earlier.
Yeah, well, and it could be a great learning point for you.
Mhm.
Like there's could be a lot of good, but you're not trying, you're just like, you're dismissing everything by saying, oh, it's a bad day. And you're
Mhm.
dismissing it all.
Yes.
And I think you didn't look at all the things that were amazing about your day,
Yes.
which, we talked about this a little bit before, and Gary Vee's talked about it a lot. Like, oh my gosh, people were so freaking blessed.
Mhm.
Like, I'm on like 2 or 3 monitors right now, not counting my phone.
Mhm.
Like, that's amazing. I could not have imagined this when I was in high school.
No.
No, couldn't have imagined it. Life is freaking amazing. So, a funky day is still a super amazing day. And I think people forget that. They
Mhm.
forget how
Well, even
amazing
to
it
hear you
is.
say you had a funky day, it had to have just been a little rough.
But it wasn't. It wasn't even rough. It was just
Okay.
like, it was like I was going through the motions. You know what I mean?
Okay, like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was just like, I'm just doing what I do. Like there was nothing like focused about the day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I
Mhm.
like things to be intentional. I like to have my dominoes set up. I like to watch my dominoes fall, right? I like my stuff. And, it was a day where, I just went through the motions, which is fine.
Didn't really happen like that.
It's just it's still a good day, but it was just like,
Mhm.
I'm just like going through the day.
Okay,
And I
same old days.
personally don't like those days, right?
Yeah.
Like I like days that are freaking amaze balls. But every day can't be amaze balls.
Eh, it can get close.
It can get so close. We've had quite a run, right? We've
Yes.
had 149 episodes of awesomeness.
Yes.
So we'll probably leave it on that note, people. I hope all of your days are epic and that you're epic, and stick with us for more of the Kilted Balls podcast. This is Ballbuster signing off.
Guilt the Dragon Jair. Love you all.